Thank you very much. Thank you. Last did an update at the February board meeting. We went through kind of some different small little items that we got new information on, tried to keep you updated on things that are going on at the state level. I'm going to get through these first slides quickly because they're the same as 2 months ago, and we have a very limited amount of time, 30 minutes. And there's a lot of new information that came out today from at the state level and the Senate and Assembly proposals that they're putting together. Doug will chime in here and there to kind of share news he's learned about that process. So today we're going to look at the reserve plan, state aid, tax cap calculation, expenses and revenues. Reserve plan, we do go in depth into this during the summer at the board retreat, and we try to go through each one of these reserves, tell you what they're there for, how we use them. So I'm just trying to present that it's pretty similar information that we shared during the summer, but just want to have another place to put it so people can look at it if they need to see it. Just shows you our reserve levels, where they are, and kind of we call it a plan, but looking out in the future years of how we plan to use the reserves in the future as well.
So I'm going to bounce back between the information that came out from the Senate Assembly, and I want to thank Senator Galvin because he did meet recently, so I'm bouncing back to all those three things. One of the conversations we had was increasing fund balance, which kind of goes along with reserves, because right now we're at 4%. Helps with cash flow, unanticipated expenses. So that's a big thing we were talking about with state representatives trying to get reform in that area. And also a reserve for special education, because those costs had to go up and down, and I should say go up, especially as people move into your district. Thank you.
Okay.
I know I need the mic, Paul. I'll do better.
So state aid update, pretty much the same as what I gave in February. The governor did her proposal, executive proposal on January 14th. Instead of the previous year, she was trying to do a rollback and take away about $600,000 from us. This time, she is going to have proposing a minimum increase of at least 2% for districts across New York State. We would qualify for that minimum 2% increase at this point. Of course, we feel it doesn't match inflationary rate. This year's 2.95. We've been, higher than 3 for the last 4 years, 3 or 4 years probably. So we do not feel it's really funding us correctly. And I think there's additional information from the state and assembly proposals right now.
No. How we rebut the 2% is we talk to our the legislators, and the Senate wants 3%, Assembly 2.9% increase, so they're both about 3%. Does that mean that's what's going to happen? No, it means now they go into negotiations, 3 men in a room, and figure out where they end up. They have found in the state, I think they're agreeing around $500 million or billion more dollars that are there and available to use. 500 something, it's a lot. And so how are they going to expend it? They also want to adjust the regional aid cost index, and what that means is it costs more to live in some areas. That would drive money to the Hudson Valley, New York City, because that area was complaining they didn't get enough of the cut this year. So therefore, if we get a little bit more, they might get even more than a little bit more. And regional cost index, that's also in both parties. And then they also want to weight English language learners, and they want to phase out income wealth index, which John will talk about a little later.
Good timing, yes.
On the bottom of that, number 8 and 5. 8 is increased funding for library materials, so that's an expense aid. Right now, I think it's $6.25. It's been that way for 20 years. So they're talking about increasing that, and they're also talking about increasing aidable salary cap. It's currently at $30,000 for BOCES to $60,000, and what that means is when we send someone to CTE, we get aid back only on the first $30,000 of the teacher's salary, which means we get back twice as much aid on those teachers. Is it a lot of money for us? No, but it's something, and it's something we've been asking for a long time. And that's in both parties for those, just what year it starts varies between the two. Senate wants to start it in '26 and Assembly in '25.
She also proposed going to paid breakfast and lunches for all students. We think that definitely has support from the Senate and Assembly levels as well. I don't know how the federal side, most of the money that New York State gets to reimburse lunches is from the federal side. So I don't know if things could change on that side, but she's proposing, based on things staying the same, that she would provide lunches and breakfast for all students across New York State.
And I did talk to the state about that because John expressed his concerns, and they said, we really haven't thought too much about that yet, about the federal impact if it goes away. I don't know how quite to take it that they're not thinking about it. And John, to steal your thunder, the New York State budget is due on the 1st. I was told by the individuals I was speaking to that don't plan on it. They're probably going to be late. It's really not schools holding it up. It is the criminal law enforcement aspect of it, just some issues around that they're trying to work out. And if you're not sure what I mean, watch the news.
I think last year, they were about a week late last year.
Yeah, it's a lot of different legal aspects for the law enforcement.
But because they're not going to, because of providing lunch and breakfast for all students, they're not going to use free reduced lunch data in our state aid formula. They're going to pull that out because people don't really report. During COVID, people were not reporting their income and they're filling out their free reduced lunch forms. So they don't, it's going to be a problem if we had to ask people to do that when they're getting free lunches. So they're going to throw that data point out, which is good. They're also going to still continue to support UPK, and we do have 5 current classes. We have 2 at Morella Two Whales and 1 at Elma. Though they're both proposing a little more per student funding for that. We'd like to see that. But we plan on having those same classes next year with money provided by New York State.
So go ahead.
One of the people in the roundtable that we just had said that she thought we had funding for 6, but I think we didn't turn anyone away. That's why we ended up with 5, right?
2 reasons. We did have room for everyone.
Yep.
We do not think we have room for 6 of them. We only planned on 5, but we didn't have anyone turn away. Okay. And the requests were a little lower this year than last year. And what you're hearing on is exactly another aspect is the funding we get, and this is something I've been advocating for, and I thought I was like the only one because I never hear anyone else say it, but there must be a lot of other people saying it, because both the Senate and the Assembly are saying instead of the amount we're getting per student now, which is $5,400, they're talking about increasing that, which would be very helpful to us in funding those programs, because it is using up local taxpayer dollars right now.
I talked about 5 years ago, I talked about combined wealth ratio, and I was kind of explaining where we stand in comparison to the rest of the state. Combined wealth ratio is used in a lot of our formulas for state aid. It's a measure of district wealth, income, property values. They establish a baseline 1.0, which is 1.0 is the statewide average, they call it, and then you could be above or below that. If you're a poor rural district, you could be at 0.6, 0.4, 0.5. There are districts in New York State that are 30, 40. There's, I think, Fire Island is like a 70 or something like that, well above that. But this is used, it impacts our state aid formulas for foundation aid, transportation aid, BOCES aid, public excess cost aid, and private excess cost aid. So where we've been going with that, you can see we've been steadily increasing. So over the last 10 years, we've gone over that statewide average, and we continue to keep inching up every year. And this chart really shows the impact of that. On the top, you see the blue line is showing our combined wealth ratio going above 1, and you can see how it directly impacts. It doesn't directly, it's not all it's in the formula for transportation aid and BOCES aid, but it definitely impacts those amounts that we get. In 2010-11, you could see if we spent $1 on transportation, we would get 70 cents back the next year. If we spent $1 on BOCES services, we would get about 68 cents back the next year. Now we're at quite a bit less than that. So you've seen that erode slowly over the last 10 years, where our aid level now for BOCES we're under 50% aid that we get back for those services. So it's quietly kind of eroding things from us in our revenue source every year. So that's another thing that's been
Yeah.
going on.
So with this, and John presenting this, I did talk about that with legislators too, because they're not aware of this. They're saying, hey, if your district's more wealthy, you should be able to afford more local tax dollars to support your budget. But then on the flip side of it, with it going up, with it, our wealth ratio higher and the state giving us less, it does not change that 50% vote, that cap for where you need to go from 50 to 60% vote. So there's no part in the formula that this takes into account. So if our aid ratio went down and we got more state aid, again, well, let's say this year it's 3.34, 3.35. Doesn't matter which way it goes, that number stays the same, which isn't right, because if the state's aiding us more, taxpayers can't afford it, maybe that levy should be lower. If they can afford more, maybe that levy should be higher, but it's nowhere in the formula to be taken into account. And really what's happening is the state is saving money. It's hard to get it from the local taxpayer dollars, which then it impacts students and their programs. So that's something I was expressing to them.
So that's one spot that's kind of eroding slowly. The other thing, if you look at our federal funds, specifically title funds, Title I, we have Title I, Title II, and Title IV funds that we receive in a district. When you look at how that comes in, the federal government gives the money to New York State. New York State then distributes it across the state based on the intent of the federal government, which is to target this money towards lower income areas and target different students and their maybe poverty levels and things like that. So if you look at child poverty in our district, you could see 5% is really a magic number, because if you go above 5%, our title fund money in 21-22 was $199,000. When we went below that 5% child poverty, our money dropped significantly to $118,000. And that went back up to 5%, we got a little more, and then it came back down. So that's kind of going on there as well. So when I build the budget for 25-26, I have to assume it's going to be $100,000 again. I wouldn't want to think that's going to go back up. And Title I money is really used to support our staff that handles RTI, intervention services, reading, that kind of thing. So we have to build that into our general fund budget to cover that $80,000 difference that we're losing next year.
And is child poverty just based upon family income? Is that how it's measured?
There's probably more to it than just that.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
But that's definitely part of it, I'm sure, is income levels. So when I look at our tax cap calculation, we have a growth factor that's given to us by New York State. We have a consumer price index, which is 2.95. That's where the cap comes in. Even though it's 2.95, our allowable growth factor reverts back to 2% because that's the maximum you can get on that. You can see our history here. No changes, except this went down a slight bit from what I presented in February. We're now at 3.34%. I think I was at 3.5 when I estimated things in February, so we came down a little bit based on updating our numbers slightly.
The one part in the formula here, pilots, there's the Industrial Development Agency, IDEA, oversees that, and they're talking about making it a requirement to have someone from the educational field sit on that board. We did have a board member years ago that did sit on it, but they didn't sit on it as a requirement. They just did it as something else they did.
Those pilots now are a pretty small amount. They used to be pretty significant. Moog in particular had many different pilot agreements in place, and I think there's only 2 left at this point in time. So just estimating that 3.34%, that's what we would do to a property value, full value, let's say $250,000, about a $90 change increase in the 25-26 year. And here's if we track the full value rate, we see this number going down because the property value has been rising so fast. There's more value to spread the tax levy across, so it gives the impression that the full value rate is going down. But you can see in the last couple of years, it's kind of flattened out, 10.95, then went to 10.72, maybe indicating that those property values have kind of leveled out and aren't moving as much right now. Just throw this one up, we've seen this before, just showing you our revenues versus CPI. You can see over the last 3-4 years, 4.7, 8% CPI, 4.12, and our revenue in a couple areas that the state provides us and our tax levy increases, not near that amount of increase. Our budget that we're working on, though, does retain all these services for the students. I even threw at the bottom here additional funding to support professional development initiatives. We talked about that last time. The money that dropped off from COVID that we were using for professional development activities, we're going to put a little more money in our general fund budget to kind of keep those things going as best we can. So we look at our expenses right now. Yep.
Just ask a quick question. What is in that line item, professional development initiatives? Is that administration? Is that teachers? Is that a combination? What's that?
It's, Mary Jo can answer if you want to, go ahead.
It's teachers, consultants, training and curriculum work that teachers write all goes into that. And there will be additional professional development needs based on the changes in the state regarding Blue Ribbon this year and years to come.
Okay.
I would say 90-some% of it goes directly towards teachers, or instructional staff for that, for what they're doing.
So does that keep, and it's just kind of a basic question, does that keep us status? Does that increase our capabilities because of additional training and development?
Actually, it's the amount right now, and John's working really hard to support this. It's actually going to be less than what we've had in the past 5 years. It's going to be a dip.
Because
In terms of-
Because of the COVID funding.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
so-
Chose to use it for.
And hopefully our use of the funds is moving all our teaching staff forward and increasing their instructional knowledge and expertise of wherever they are with it. And our goal is to try to move faster than other districts or more in depth, depending on what areas we're going into, like the Blue Ribbon Commission. We're just trying to figure it out at this point because it's new from the state. And one of the groups I was meeting with while I was in Albany was the one about not analysis, but accountability. Thank you. I already went over it with Dr. Dudek. It was accountability, and the question was, well, how is the Blue Ribbon Commission going to come into accountability? They're not sure yet. But we're going to move forward with the plan. I gave her a whole nice spreadsheet on it that, we went over, and I go, here's what they're doing now. And of course she said, well, what's going to mean with this? I'm like, they're working on it.
So the last three items, you got student counselor support and staff, you got teachers on special assignment, and then you got additional funding. Are those kind of all the same, or are they different line items? Because you had mentioned that you talked about the reading program, and the reading program is actually in the line above.
So the school counselors, there's a code just for counselors. The TOSA is actually just a teacher on special assignments, so hers we just track separately, but her salary actually falls into a teacher line, into a 2110. And then the additional for professional services, that's where there's codes just for professional development that Mary Jo oversees. So when we say additional funding, it's because we're losing off on these grants, so the number on the A fund will look to go up because there's less money overall we're putting there because we're losing the grants, but what you see in the general budget is going up to try to take the place of the grants.
Got it, and that makes sense.
Because those grants and the title funds, that's separate from this general fund budget. They don't mix, they're held separately.
Thank you.
So as of today, our expense side, looking at a budget increase of approximately 2.63%. You can see transportation costs definitely going up a lot of, pretty evenly spread, I'd say. Like you got general instructional transportation. Our benefits are lower than we've seen in the past, which is great because we've seen not as big increases on the retirement system payments. We've controlled our health insurance costs very well. Workers' comp is very well controlled right now as part of the consortium that we're in with Erie 2 BOCES. So we've been, pretty good on benefit side. So right now 2.63 increase on expenses. Revenue side, you can see, and you're saying state aid, if we're getting a 2% increase on state aid, well, that's not everything in state aid. So foundation aid's one part, but we got expense-based aids and things that are, like I said, not getting as much back as we used to in the past. So that's why state aid shows around 1% increase. Erie County sales tax has been a good spot. It's been going up kind of steadily, so we have an adjustment there. Just a small reduction in reserve use. And other sources, typically that's, there's lots of different places there that comprise other sources. So a small change there, 8%, but it's not a huge dollar amount. And tax levy increase of, like I said, 3.34%.
Staying with that slide, I just want to commend John, because in 24-25, when we went to that $3 million for Erie County sales tax, he really was analyzing it, because if costs go up, people buy less, but if things cost more, the sales tax could be more. And I did have one of the town supervisors call us and say that we were nuts for the number we used. So quarterly, I go over and ask John how we're doing with it, and he was good with it. So I anticipate, because again, you say, well, if we're going to experience a recession or something, is really a 5% increase there normal? We've had lots of conversations, but based on the work John has done there, I think we're in a great spot for that, because that's, how do you know how much people are going to spend? But he's done very well there, so thank you, John.
That's a number we saw. It changed quite a bit, of course, when COVID occurred and people were not out buying things, and we saw that sales tax number drop substantially in those years. So it's kind of back where it should be and a little higher.
John, could you back up a slide? Transportation. So what's the increase in the 4.19% for transportation?
You have a lot of, if you got fuel, I know fuel is going down, but we don't necessarily go by the market price today when we do budgets. We kind of plan, what could it be like next year? Fuel, all the supplies they use there, mechanics, bus drivers, all that stuff going up.
You have the contract with the support staff, the drivers, mechanics out there. So that's a big driver in there. Past years, we've been able to keep it down. One of the concerns we have with the fuel, especially now with what's going off at the federal level, and all the different tariffs and prices, and we're expecting a big change in that. And I think in the next presentation, is that the one you do? Or no, transportation is just one, so never mind. Those are the costs.
Okay.
Again, it's percentage, but so if you look, it's $114,000 more, but definitely there's a lot more money going to instruction with the increase. So if we look at this point in time, where we have a gap, a difference of $160,000, very manageable. Last year at this time, I think we had $700,000 gap because we didn't know what was going out that foundation aid at the state level. So $160,000 is where we can definitely work with that, and we'll wait to have the state aid thing play out and see where we are there. Hopefully, we'll get a little more generated through that process. But if we don't, we can make this work. We can always use a little more reserves or things like that to make that work. So not any concern at this point.
And never mind, you're on capital outlay. Go ahead.
And capital outlay project, realizing we're not, our next big capital project is probably going to focus on, basics of heating systems and roofs and things like that. We do need to address our transportation garage, and there's a lot of things there that are aging and need to be replaced. So this capital outlay project for next year, we want to kind of do some work over there and make sure they're getting things kept up to date. We'd like to rebuild a bus lift, do some pavement repairs. If $100,000 will do that, a bus lift we're hearing could be quite a bit more. So we're going to work and see how much a bus lift really costs to be fully redone. And we'll do whatever we can to transportation. There's a lot. If we can't do that, there's a lot of other things we can do at transportation office building. So we will address that in the summer of 2026.
Now, there is some hope for more funding here. Both the Senate and the Assembly have it going up to $250,000, $250,000. So we'd have to figure out how we would do that. So that could be a change. I think you saw the number of $60-some million for the budget. But if we can get another 150 here, because we get aid back on that, so we wouldn't not want to leave that out there and not get that back from the state. So we'll have to monitor what's happening at the state level in case there's a change here. But I'd never seen it in both houses before.
I was going to ask if Senator Galvin, when you talked to him last week or a couple days ago, if you had any conversation about that.
Yeah, that was one of the things, not only was it there, but it was in other people I talked to.
That's one of the things that when we were there last month, it was talked about.
Yeah.
Pushing them, and that might be one of the reasons why ECASD is really active in pushing that specific bill. Might be the reason why we're seeing it both houses finally.
Yeah, so thank you to them, because it's been years, I've never seen it in both houses before.
That'd be great, yes, because a $100,000 project doesn't get you nearly what it did 10 years ago. So that would be a great change.
Does the state ever talk about like the statewide problem of bus driver shortages or anything along
Oh,
those
we're
lines?
going to get that in, next slide.
Next slide. Okay. Well, I know about the buses that we're.
Oh, there we are, buses, you're all set.
But not about drivers specifically.
Yeah, so in this is to keep on that thought, since you asking around the bus slide, they really aren't looking legislatively to do anything about a bus driver shortage, because they consider that more of a labor. And really what's impacting that, I think it would be easier to get more employees if the rules were easier to obtain your license. Now, I don't want it easy so someone doesn't know how to drive, but they make it so stringent in the process of working through to get it, that's tough. They politely listen, but I don't see any movement that I'm on changing any regulations right now for the requirements. And then also I was going to say here, has to do with EV buses, which did have a question just at our last thing we were at. And right now, the Senate might be looking to push that out 2 years. It's only in their area they were talking about it. And they're also looking to make adjustments to the bus requirements, including that the SED commissioner has authority to approve a limited number of implementation delays. So therefore, we could say, well, we're delaying it for this reason, and then the commissioner just could keep saying yes, yes, yes. I don't think electric buses are bad. I think the cost of them to the taxpayers and how it impacts them, that's a big problem. And then also securing them, and right now I'm hearing the charging units are very hard to come by. So not only the buses, but now it's the charging units too. And as we did have a board member coming back across the state testing electric vehicles, because the cold weather really did suck the electricity out of the vehicle, and we do have some very cold weeks here. So cuts the battery life.
We had to stop.
Yep.
It can't do that.
Can't, and I was talking to someone else who was saying just putting the snow tires on electric vehicles significantly changes it too. So, hey, with the bus can get there, we just won't put snow tires on it. I don't think we put snow tires on the buses. I think we have great tires on all year round. So, again, that would wear down the life of it for any study or test.
Yes, but they're so much heavier that they actually do go through snow better than everything.
Oh, buses?
Even my car.
Oh, really?
Like, the snow was incredible, and I wasn't sliding, it was just a lot of snow.
She said she was doing awesome driving through the snow.
So our Proposition 2 is very similar to last year's. We are buying traditionally diesel, gasoline fueled vehicles unless something comes up that makes it better cost by electric or try out electric. We will do that, but right now this cost is based on gas and diesel fueled vehicles.
I have a question. Even if we get the ability to have a grant or something like that where the bus would be free, do we still have to go through the process of it being voted on by the...
Just to purchase it, we need that, yes. It's a
Yeah.
separate proposition.
Unless the grant is such a grant that they gave us all the money the very first day. But other than that, we would need to borrow money, and then the grant would pay back over time.
One board seat is open, and Jane is telling us she's not running for that seat, so it is open, and here's all the information on how to do a petition for that, to be on the list for the vote in May.
If I can throw a plug in, there is a really great workshop for people interested in running for a board at ECASB. It is the 22nd of March, and if you're interested in that, just go onto the ECASB website, or I suppose you could probably contact Nora.
she can sign you up. It's a really great overview of what board service is all about. You'll get to meet other people who are running in other districts. And I would highly encourage anybody who's interested in running for the board to attend that workshop.
Very good, thank you.
And good luck. Somebody step up, please.
Thank you for your 10 years, too.
So,
I have to say,
go ahead.
both years both times that I ran, it was because the day before the paperwork was due, nobody had submitted their paperwork, and so that's how I've done this. I really hope somebody steps up, puts in some paperwork, so I don't have to say, okay, I'll do it one more time.
Hey, Mary Jo, do you want to tell people they can come in while John finishes up?
Nora, do you think the flyer for the prospective school board member, maybe we could attach that to the post for applying, just so people know what they're getting into?
Well, when they pick up the petitions,
You
it's
give them that
included in the
flyer?
packet. And then I
Excellent.
talk to them in detail about what it is.
Right, okay, thank you.
So again, we're going to wait for that budget at New York State's
We
level.
like you.
4/1 is traditionally a due date, but may not happen on that date. And then we'll have a final budget presented to the board in April, and at that time, you'll act on that and approve propositions to be voted on in May. There's our contacts, our local representatives. There's what's left. We have an April 9th board meeting, budget hearing on May 13th, and vote on May 20th.
And I
Any
do want to
questions?
thank Senator Gallivan he actually does every year annually, take extra time to meet with superintendents as a group to hear the concerns, and I can tell he listens because he does remember the conversations from before, reflects on it, and hopefully he's been one of the big catalysts between some of the things where I've said, I've never seen this before of getting those in, so thank you to him.
So John, just want to make one more mention for those that maybe not know. Some of the EV bus conversations that you and I have had, trying to understand sort of the ability and configuration of what that is, working as a bit of a subject matter expert to support the board and making sure we're asking the right questions and that we're in front of it versus just kind of getting pushed back. So I've been working with John and some others and Mr. Schofield as to make sure that we're asking the right questions, and just doing a study to do a study has to have some purpose, and so we're really looking at that very closely.
All right, yeah, thank you.
And there's more chairs in the back if you want to grab one, but if you're happy where you are, stay right where you are. All right.
Okay. Okay, we're going to get going. I want to welcome you to the Iroquois Central School District Board of Education meeting. There are 2 recognition of guest periods, one for agenda-related comments and one for other topics. Please refrain from person-related comments and address those to the appropriate administrator. To speak, fill out the proper form and submit it to the district clerk. Public comments is limited to 15 minutes total, with each speaker allowed up to 3 minutes. This meeting is held in public rather than a public meeting, and while we are listening, we won't engage in dialogue tonight. The meeting is live streamed and the recording will be posted online. To start off with, the Pledge of Allegiance will be done by Marilla Primary students, Connor and Jude from grade 3, and Jaden and Shay from kindergarten. Please everyone rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll move along to the student report, which is being given by the high school, and the students are going to be Meredith, Samantha, and Juliana.
Again, we'd like to thank the Board of Education for all the support that they give us and that they give the high school for all of our activities, and especially for all the programs that they support in our high school. I'd like to first introduce Mr. Naparella and Mrs. Payne today, who is going to talk about our art program, and who's also going to introduce the students who are going to speak today to the Board of Education. So, Mr. Naparella and Mrs. Payne. Thank you.
Sorry. Good evening, everyone. It is an honor to speak in front of us. This is something that we're truly essential. A well-rounded education is an importance to our high school and our school art program. Art is not just creating beautiful pieces, but it's unlocking creativity, developing critical thinking, and finding the personal voice of the students that carries on throughout the rest of their lives. Our high school program provides students with the tools and guidance to explore the wide range of artistic materials, from drawing and painting to digital art to sculpture. It fosters the environment in which students can be encouraged to experiment, take risks, and push their creative boundaries. More importantly, it gives them a platform to express themselves, reflect on their ideas, and communicate through visual language.
Hello, everybody. So we are super excited to highlight some things that we've been doing in our art program over the past school year, and also shine a spotlight on some awesome star students that we have up at the high school. But first, just to highlight some of the things going on, Mrs. Payne has been running our high school art club, and currently students are working on a Red Hawk mural for the new weight room at the high school. We have had several students participate in area all high school art exhibitions at both UB and Buffalo State College. This year we have participated in the Erie One BOCES Art Challenge and are happy to say that
We're going to move on to board discussion and news we're sharing. We're going to start off with some board awards for two individuals. The first award is for Michaela Thomas. Michaela had a very dominant season this year. She finished the season with a 44-1 record. She had one loss during the regular season and was able to avenge the loss in the state finals against a very tough opponent. Going to the tournament as the number 2 seed, Michaela made a very impressive run with a 14-5 decision in the semifinal round to advance to the state finals. With the move to freestyle wrestling for girls, Michaela spent countless hours in the offseason training to accomplish her goals of state championship with 11-6 decision win in the finals. The 2025 girls wrestling team is the first official championship event for girls wrestling. Michaela's win marks an historic milestone, making her the first ever state championship in her weight class. Iroquois is honored to add Michaela to the very impressive list of state champion wrestlers to grace our halls. Michaela, congratulations.
Just like all the little kids. Come on, you gotta stand in front of us. Not going this high. You don't have to say the pledge. Congratulations.
Okay, next we have an award for Meredith here. Every March we celebrate Youth Art Month to recognize the art in schools. The New York State Art Teacher Association runs a flag design contest, and this year the theme was Healing Through Color. High school freshman Meredith entered the contest, and out of 2,440 designs from across New York State, she was elected the overall winner. Her flag will represent New York State at the National Art Educational Conference later this month. So, Meredith. Okay, thank you, everyone. Congratulations. We're going to continue our board meeting, and everyone is more than welcome to hang out with us if they'd like. And again, thank you.
All the fun stuff's over, I gotta go.
Okay, we are going to move on to the official student board member to kind of finalize that and get that locked down. Just to kind of recap, I think where we had kind of ended up in deciding was that, the students were going to elect the board member, and that they were going to become part of the board. Just a few reminders that, the student board member will not be allowed to vote or attend executive sessions, and they will not be entitled to receive any sort of compensation, which kind of goes either way. So
We'll pay the kids, but not you.
So I guess are we agreed on that we're going to allow the student body during the elections to elect this individual?
No, this would be, when they vote for student council, this would just be another one of the individuals they would elect.
I have a question, because I attended it was actually a thing for, a workshop for our district clerk program through ECSD, but there was a big presentation on student, what is it, ex facto members. And one of the things they talked about was that the student has to be elected and in place for July 1st and be there for our reorg meeting. So when do our students do that?
They do it in the spring before they leave, so they're done.
Okay, so that's
I wish Sue Payne was here, because she would know, because she's involved in student government. I want to say May is where they have their election.
All right, so that's not a problem.
Not a problem.
And the other thing is that you're kind of laughing about the idea of, they don't get something for it, but one of the questions that was brought up, and the attorney was kind of not entirely sure about the answer, is if the student starts asking us for letters of recommendation, that could be seen as something. So that's another thing I think we need to kind of talk about, like, does that have to be in our policy? Would that, do we?
No, a student can ask anyone they want for letters of recommendation. I get a few each year. Like for students in my cabinet or other ones that I've known throughout the years that I write letters of recommendation. So as a board member, if you have knowledge you think would give you the appropriate information to write a letter, I would highly encourage it. If a student came up and you really don't know them and they ask for a letter, I would ask you to politely say, I don't have enough information, but someone say on the board with you, I would think you would have plenty of decision-making. You've seen them in conversations they took part in.
And the way this is worded, it says they can't receive any compensation for participating. So in other words, if just because it makes it easier, if Meredith was a student board member, you could still write a recommendation because everything she's done with art and all the great accomplishments, it just can't be, I'm writing this because you're a
This is
board
your
member.
reward. Yeah.
So it wouldn't be a bribe,
Yeah.
to be on the board.
And then the other part of that was that we were asked, and since Nora wasn't present at that workshop, I'd like to point out that we need to give all of this information to Nora so that she can forward how we determine what our policy is. Send the policy when we determine it to ECSB, because they're planning to create sort of like the training that we do. We're planning on creating a training for the student. And it's going to be very general, very, and not too terribly concrete, because every district gets to do things a little bit differently. So keeping that in mind, but we want to do something for the students so that they at least have some kind of resource.
So you're asking for the policy?
Oh, yeah, once we.
Yep.
Once it's approved. Yeah, once it's approved.
Are we planning on having, maybe it be a junior or a senior, or just they have to attend 1 year in our school? Like, do we think freshman or sophomore could do what we're expecting of them?
I was going to leave that up to the election process where, people put in for the offices they want to run. So as
Okay.
long as they've been here for 1 year, they would qualify, put their name in the hat, and then the student body would elect the person. I think predominantly it's going to be older classmen, but we might get someone here, if a junior and senior, they do it 2 years in a row, we could get a junior 1 year, and then they would be a senior the next year if they ran
Okay.
again in one.
And if we documented for the people that are thinking about running, what our expectations of the board member are? Yet?
No, we have to determine, in the notes that I sent everyone, there's different choices on how to choose one, and then once you determine how to choose one, then we can move forward and let the high school know what the expectations are, depending on what you all decide tonight.
Okay, because in the policy, it talks about the election process, but not necessarily what the roles and responsibilities will be of the student board member.
Right, and then that's where I would put something together to give
Okay.
to the student government advisor, so people would know what they're getting into.
Okay. I mean, just like the training for a school board member, we want to make sure that
They have an onboarding process.
they have an onboarding
Yeah.
process, they know what to expect, they know that they need to come to a monthly meeting.
And the times of the meetings.
Possibly
and
work
so-
session, that we expect you to report back to the student body.
There were a number of district clerks from districts that already have a student sitting on their board, and they talked about how that student, generally speaking, is onboarded by the superintendent and the board president. Sometimes the high school principal is involved. Just each district does it a little bit differently, but in almost every case, they said that the student meets with the superintendent, and often the board president was included before each meeting, so that really their training is done monthly, so that they know what to expect, they know what kinds of questions they can ask, and who they should direct questions to, and that kind of stuff. So that's what a lot of districts who already have students on the board are doing.
I guess I would want them to know what to expect before they run.
Yeah, and that's where they should
Right.
be like,
So like the idea.
a pamphlet. I think you mentioned a pamphlet before.
Yeah.
That type of thing would have to be developed.
Okay.
And I think it would parallel to high extent what you get as a regular board member, except the nuances of not being able to vote, not executive session, and probably not attending the trips like New York City and stuff, or the conventions, would be the few things in the trainings at Erie County School Boards, unless they had a specific one for students.
Well, I don't know, there might be some districts that if NISBA could.
I meant the more the outing trainings, you know what I mean.
And so since every school district in New York State's required to do this starting July 1st, has NISBA or ECASB put together kind of like a description? Working on it? Okay.
There's a lot of leeway between districts, like how you get your student board member, how many you're gonna have. There are some guidelines, but like a district our size, we're only required to have one. That
Okay.
doesn't mean we couldn't have two if we wanted. We could set it up where our student body elects somebody as a junior, and then that person becomes the person as the senior, and then that way they have a 2-year, everybody gets elected, has a 2-year stint, except for the first person who, the first election would have to be a junior and a senior, because the senior will be outgoing. And there are some districts that do it that way. And I personally like that model. I think it's better for the student, and it also gives you the opportunity to have a student not be able to attend and the other student can. But then there are other districts that are just like, they just have an election every year, and that student becomes person every year. It really just depends on what the district wants, and because there's so many districts, there's not an easy way to set up training. Because what our rules at our meeting might be really different than what they do in a neighboring district or district on the other end of the state. Some students, what I've seen, it sounds like they do what we have our students do in the reporting, how we have a student come up and give us a report for their building. just kind of giving the reports for the buildings, where other students are really active and they say, hey, you're talking about testing, let me tell you about my experience as a test taker. And it helps drive policy, so it's how much you get involved as a district with your student board member.
Yep.
And that's gonna be different in every district, so it's kind of hard to train for that.
And I really feel that, it's going to happen, this year, and then the board is going to reflect and maybe make changes for the following year. It's too hard to plan every last thing out and figure everything out, right now. We're going to have to get the board member in. And quite honestly, part of that conversation should be that first student board member to get their feelings on it, because they're going to say, well, maybe you guys should change this and maybe you can't. So I really think that it's not going to be finalized, with this draft. There's no way it could be.
I just want to make sure the students' expectations of their duties is clear before they run. So.
I'll say
but it
yes.
sounds like that's going to be a discussion we're having. Okay.
One thing that was made really clear in the workshop is that you've got to stress to the student that this is not an opportunity for them to come and complain about everything that they hate about their teacher or their class or, whatever. It's not a venting place. It's a place to come and affect policy and fiscal choices that we make as a board. And it's their opportunity to make sure that the student voice is heard in those decisions.
To start off the next three, 6.0. The next three, 6.03, 6.04, 6.05.
We just have to make sure everyone's in
sorry.
agreement for the policy, because what has been talked about before is there going to be active participation members, or not just someone to give a report like we have already. We talked about having two people, but we settled on one, because if you had a person in the audience that came up here had a different viewpoint, it would change the discussion. So we settled with only one. Whoever's elected is the one on it. So the real question is, for the board, does everyone agree that it's going to be elected by the student body during the regular elections? And if we have that piece, then we can move forward with the policy.
Yes.
Everyone agrees?
Can I read you the choices, the suggested choices? The student that's been duly elected as student president of the high school, so student president, a student duly elected by the student body,
That one.
That was the one.
That's the one.
a student selected by the high school student government,
No.
student selected by the high school principal,
No.
student selected by the superintendent, or a student selected by a majority vote of the board.
No.
So.
Number
a
two.
student
Number
duly
two.
selected by the student body. Correct?
Correct.
Yes.
I just want to be clear.
Okay. So 6.03, 6.04, 6.05, I'm going to start off kind of lumping them somewhat together and make some general statements, and then we can break it down on however, the individual board members want to. And what I mean by that is that at the end of last year, we decided, that we did want to do some board training, and that is going to take place, before the next board meeting with the school attorney. That's also going to be in somewhat response to the roundtables, and I want to bring the planning conference in here as well with general statements. I think what's important is that at least from that if each individual board members fully understands the roles and expectations, at least at how they're thought and viewed, and that's some of the information the attorney is going to provide and allow to ask questions to clarify those roles. The board's areas, we are definitely, at the 50,000 foot level, and we deal with, finance and policy. We should not get involved with, curriculum. We should not get involved with operations. We should not get involved in personnel. And that's for, and a lot of the roundtable, at least the one on here for the staff roundtable, heavily revolved around the reading program. The reading program is crucial and important, but it's directly, not in the lane of the board, at least not at that level. What I mean by that is if in 3 years, if the reading program is not producing results and the return on that investment is not where it needs to be, that's where at that time, whoever, the board is, the superintendent is, wants to head into a change. That's when that would be discussed, generally boards of education aren't experts, in curriculum, and we don't really weigh in directly on that. It does not mean that if a board member has a question or concern, that they should not pick up the phone and call the superintendent or talk to him to get clarification. That is a good thing to do, but that's kind of where that ends. And it becomes tough because in order for any large institution like a district to function, everyone kind of has to, stick to their lane, their responsibilities, or it does not work. I'll speak to that more in one moment. So as we see our role, we're at the top, and there is a lot of authority invested in the board. But the greatest responsibility of this board is not to use that authority. That we elect professionals. We hire professionals to do their jobs and carry out their responsibilities. And when we get too involved, whether it's with the administrators, it looks like that we're taking their side, or they're undermining them. Or if we get too involved, with the teachers or staff, it looks like that we're taking their side. It's not really our role to take sides. It's our role to allow the people that we hire who are professionals to do their job. Like I said, calling, I've done it, calling Doug and asking, a particular question or getting clarification is fine. Direct hands-on is not what we should do. And it's tough because there's things you can care about and you want to be involved in, and we don't go and fix things. An example, we all got a letter about the bleachers in the pool. And what I mean by that is, at the end of the day, if the policy was followed where it was left to just the building, pulling out the bleachers, that incident would not have occurred. I get it, coaches or parents want to get out of their lane and, pull out the bleachers, but it leads to problems. And I've been in other school districts, not in the pool, where in the gym where the bleachers were not pulled out, and the parents would pull them out, and the coach said, no, I understand. If that means you have to stand or you can't be in here, that's fine, but you're not pulling them out because that is the building responsibility. So in that case, the coach would talk to the athletic director would follow up with the building personnel and get it done. It also stops the problem from happening again. If parents and coaches keep pulling out bleachers, the problem will never get solved because the people who need to know may not be aware. But
just on that though, I called Doug and corresponded with him because it is a safety issue even for the custodian. So it sounds like you took appropriate measures to investigate if the current bleachers need to be fixed. Because I don't want Chris or anyone else getting hurt. And pulling out the bleachers either. So, whilst I'm not, staying in my lane, but calling out a potential safety issue for anyone that's.
No, that was just an example of when people do get.
He really didn't know you contacted me.
Yeah.
But I think that's a great example of where you contacted me, and I'm like, yeah, it is a safety concern, because ultimately it comes down then to, if the custodians are pulling them out and they're responsible for the safety of equipment and it's not safe, then they have to say, it's not safe, we can't fix it, or they should fix it. If we're having trouble pulling it out, they should fix it. And then it is safe to pull it out. And that's the following of the right procedure, which you did, you contacted me, that was the right thing. Then I called the AD who got a hold of the maintenance, and that should be fixed. And then my step now is to follow up with the AD and say, hey, how's it going? And then they'll tell me an answer, and then I'll walk over there and I'll see the coach, and I'll say, hey, you've been pulling the bleachers out, or they've been taken care of? And they'll either say, well, yeah, we've still, I'll say, oh, you're not supposed to. And then I'll go and back that up, or I'll hear, yes, it's working. And do that. And really, that's more of a principal than a superintendent role anyways, to walk in there and ask who's doing what.
And the bleacher thing was just more of an example for me. Mm-hmm. So what I wanted to kind of get, our level is really the 50,000-foot level. And we need to maintain that level to allow, the superintendent to do his job, and then, the administrators to do their jobs, and the teachers to do theirs. We can't be in the airport lounge. We can't be in the terminal. We need to be at the 50,000-foot level. Our one employee, so to speak, is the superintendent. And we judge that performance based on how the overall district's running. And then when we have concerns, we would bring it up with the superintendent, and then he would pass it on down to wherever it needs to go from there. It's just, we have to have that complete, impartiality, whether it's administrators, teachers, coaches, parents, and it's tough to do that, because there's a lot of parents that will come up to me with a lot of things, and there was one who was a good friend who came and asked me about busing, and I just referred her to Eric. It's just learning to do that, because you want to help, but you can't, because in the end, you can make it worse. And the other thing is that I just want to bring in, and I did talk to Doug, and I've kind of, gave him my thoughts, that the district planning conference, the way it is done, I don't find it to be beneficial or useful to our district. I think having the board there and having administrators report to us sets up the exact negative look that we don't want. They don't work for us. The principals do not work for us. And then when they ask us for stuff, they don't work for us. They work for the superintendent. And a lot of the information, the results, should be sent to our email so we can read it, engage, and probably ask questions. But I've asked, I think that whole thing needs to be reformulated. Not to be like tongue-in-cheek or difficult. And I know I've talked to some other board members. The best part of that conference ends up sometimes becoming lunch, and that's not what it's about. And it's like, it's not really our lane. So that's my opening, monologue on that, and I guess now it's, what you all think.
And I want to thank Jim for coming to that, because I got to admit, the district planning conference is something I inherited, kept modifying, kept working on, kept tweaking over all the years. But I definitely see his point, reflective on it, of where it is drawing people in. And I said, one of the things maybe it could go to is where what we actually ended up doing is, what are the presentations the board wants to hear throughout the year, and then you get those informations at presentations of the board. So it's not, you're not getting the information, you're getting it in the right method of the presentations. So I never thought of that way when he presented it to me. I'm like, what? And, so that was a reflective piece on my part.
So I guess, are we suggesting not having it at all? Or just cutting it down to maybe a day or whatever we feel?
Well, my suggestion was to at least to have it totally looked at and reformulated, and I thought that it's not obviously my decision. So in other words, if that is something that the board would agree on, then Doug or the superintendent would begin to look at that. And is it one day? Is it, an afternoon? What is it? But I didn't want, it's us. Do we want them to start to look at that? And
I feel that the most valuable part of the 2 days, as it stands currently, is the FaceTime with the administrators and understanding what their goals are for the year and reflection on the past year. Because that is really the only time, other than student reports here at the board meeting, that we get dedicated FaceTime with them. So I feel that that's a good part of, but I don't think it needs to probably be two full days. I think that it would be good to have some sort of meeting throughout the summer with some FaceTime, but
And that could be the design the board talks about, because I think you're right on, here's our goals and here's our progress we're making, because then how do you set district goals or look at the strategic plan? But having all the principals present all of it at the same time in the day, I do watch board members over the years glaze over. So maybe it's we spread it out so that each board meeting, like we had John present before this one, that they come to a board meeting and they present. So this board, and that would be something we'd put together a timeline. Like I really enjoyed what we did this year, where we're having a presentation 3 times on the Family Support Center. We're having a presentation on all the different things throughout the year, but you would have them at the very beginning of the year. So you might start with the first one in whatever board meeting is in July, and then you have another one at the one board. I think we have 2 board meetings in August. So you could get through the elementaries, and by the end of September, October at the latest, you would have seen them all, but you're not glazing over because it's your 6th one. By the time you get to the high school, it's like, okay.
And to keep us in our lane, that they're not actually reporting to us, because they report to Doug. So if it is, so we need the information ahead of time. I'm trying to think about it. I'll make Bob Berry, the right now, the principal of the high school, that it would be like, and let's just say it would be that we're seeing that there's 10,000, vape hits. So now we have a question, in other words, it would be, Bob, present to us, what are you gonna do to curtail this vaping? So it's information that we need and we want, and they prepared it and they're presenting it to us. So it's not just like he's like going through his list of things he's done all year or next year, that it's narrowed and focused. It's kind of how we're viewing that.
And they should be items that are tied directly to the things that the superintendent is coming to the board saying we need to change the policy, or we need more money for this, or
Or updates on the strategic plan.
Something, and it could go here. But it should be directly related to something, to some topic that is,
Within our purview.
Yeah, I mean, how I would kind of envision it developing would be, we have our first meeting, usually it has to be by law in the first 15 days of the year for the reorg meeting. Let's call that the first meeting. And that's a long one that you drift off on. Our board members pay attention the whole time. It's just a long meeting. And the second one, then we'd have a work session attached to it where we would decide, here's what we feel is important to hear about from these meetings. So from the elementary school, I would think we would want to hear from the principals on the reading program. From the middle school, SEL was brought up at the community roundtable. We want to hear about, well, that's elementary, so that'd still be the reading program. High school, we want to hear vaping, he just brought up. So therefore, we have the structure of what's coming along, but I think the goals are always important to hear their steps of the goals. And then along with other things like EV buses, a time where John's reporting on the EV buses, and we have, from this year, I think I have it here quick.
I'm laughing because I vividly remember a school, or the summer conference where we talked about EV buses for at least 3 hours, and I was glazing over then. Too long, very long.
Way too long.
Yeah. I don't know why we were talking, yeah.
The board, so there was enough, and that's where I think board members have to speak up when they want to keep hearing about it, because the board is one body with 7 minds, and 4 minds kind of drive the way it's going, and I think the minds that spoke up, well, maybe it was one, said, yeah, I want to hear more. Now, maybe the other 6 said, I really don't want to, but they didn't speak up. So it kept going on and on and on. I just look at the list of what we had today with ambassador, roundtables, board self-evaluation, goals, policies, budget, AI in the school, resolutions, Sandy Hook, building condition survey, buses, strategic plan, graduation requirements. I mean, I would think the board would want to have a report on graduation requirements at one of the meetings. So, we can keep each year tailoring it at that first, half hour we would spend developing what we want to hear the rest of the year.
And the big point is, what I really want is, that way we would have, before, if it's going to be a building principal or whoever, we'd have the information ahead of time, so we knew what questions to ask. Do you know? So it's not like we're hearing it and then we're reacting to it just based on, without having the background. I would almost want, in other words, if Mary Jo's going to do a presentation, I would want the presentation ahead of time, maybe even a week or two, so I can look at it, digest it, make notes, and then when she stands up there and gives it, I got this question. It's even for anyone at even extremely high levels, it's very tough to hear and react when there's no thought or reflection in between. And this would allow for that too. I mean...
Well, if we're doing it at the board meetings, it would automatically come out the Friday before the Wednesday board meeting, so you would have it 4 days, 5 days ahead of time.
Or we could even move that table up for certain things I'm not saying we should, I'm saying...
Yeah, we couldn't do it for everything.
Well, not, yeah. But is there, and I guess on this one, do we have a general consensus that we want to look at this? Okay.
I'd make a suggestion that you still have at least some time in the summer that you sit down for district board planning, where you have some kind of team building kind of thing, something that would help talk about keeping the board in their lane, some kind of training thing. And you could also go back to putting that where the district, where the board goals are set. The business of the board could still be done in a, in a shorter time frame, maybe like a morning session or an afternoon session if you did a whole day kind of thing, where you still do some of that work. Because I think that that's a really important time, especially for the new board member that comes on, to start to get into the groove and understand how the district works, and to be able to meet with other board members and start to form those, colleague bonds that are needed to be able to have positive discourse, at the board table. So I would still encourage you to have something in the summer.
What I, just putting that together, I know sometimes I process fast. For in the summer, I would say there would be one where the board would determine the training they have, look at the board goals, look at the board evaluation, so they know where they're going to self-evaluate at the end. And then they would talk about topics for presentations, and those would be the 4 things of what's done. And then you could come in, have a continental breakfast, and eat lunch, and then that would give you the social team building time with a lunch, and then when the lunch is done, it would be over.
I mean,
Really quickly putting it together in my head, listening to you.
no, and that I think would make sense.
Jane, you gonna come to it? I'm just kidding.
I don't.
Oh, she's serving us, I'm interrupting her, so she doesn't have a chance?
We'll make it like June 28th, right after graduation.
Well,
No, because then your new board member is not.
actually, no, we'll invite ECASB, and she could come and do the training.
No,
It actually just triggered another thought, I hate to do this, but going back to student members, considering if they're going to actually take the oath of office. A lot of districts do that. I think that would be something.
Yeah, they would think they
really
would have
important,
to,
too.
yeah.
Just throwing that out there.
but, no, I think that's great, and that's how discussion works, and it's already, I think it'll accomplish a lot of, the points you wanted, and I think it'll be more poignant questions. And then just to touch it with the, the round table, and the attorney, because they're kind of lumped together, before we go into, or have, any comments on those that aren't, fiscal or policy orientated, I'd really encourage us to hear from, the attorney, next month. And I think the best part about this is that he's gonna be there to answer questions. And he, like, what about this, what about that? So you can ask those important questions. I mean, originally it was like, I didn't want, so he talked to Doug and I, and then I talked to you guys, and then we ran back and forth. And I think, where the superintendent was correct is he's just gonna come, he'll be here for, at least for an hour, and he will do his training and then be available for any questions that we have, which I think will definitely help us, in our lane and our understanding of the positions.
Is that the meeting that's April 29th?
No,
No, that's something
it's-
different.
the regular board meeting.
It's covered under executive, or it's covered under, client privilege, because when the lawyer comes in, it's not open. It is not open.
It's executive session before the April board meeting.
Yes, and it starts at
Yeah,
5:30.
The April board meeting is the 9th.
It says on the website, April 29th, special meeting. I was just trying to clarify what that
That's a
is.
special BOCES meeting that we have to have.
Oh, right.
every year.
That's the BOCES.
That's a very
Yeah,
quick
that's
one.
like a 30, I'll say 5-minute one where we have to vote on the BOCES budget. Has to be the same day for all districts in Erie too.
Okay.
So really, we don't do any other business except vote on the BOCES budget.
And then I had envisioned, that we set 5:30, it goes to 6:30. That would still give us a half hour for a few things that we may have to, discuss, or if it runs over, it runs over. It gives time for that. On those topics, are there any other thoughts or comments? Okay, then I'm gonna turn it over to our superintendent for his, report.
No one came to the last board meeting. The strategic plan, part of the timeline right now is giving the areas to the board. And we did, and I want to thank Dr. Dudek because she's painstakingly went through all of them that we could get our hands of. I don't know if it's just our area or the whole state, but of all the strategic plans they had, and we really ended up with communication facilities staying the same, and then changing student experience to student instructional experience. We presented that to all the administrators, and they thought that was a good change, because it's still incorporates student experiences in there, but they're centered in their instructional student experience. Right now, I have put out the past surveys we have done to the administrators, so they can start looking at the surveys that will go out to parents, community, faculty and staff, students, and there's one group I'm missing. Parents would be another one, but we'd put out to those groups. Facilities would be one of the areas. And that's what I have for that area. And if anyone has any questions, we're moving along with the timeline. Did get delayed a little bit. I had a cabinet yesterday, but because of my kidney stone, I didn't make that cabinet, so we're going to readjust that. John's going to talk about the internal audit and the external audit.
There are two items on tonight's agenda. 23.09 is the internal audit. Internal audit is when we have auditors come in from the outside. They review our process and procedures for different areas. We look at payroll sometimes, we look at purchasing, different things like that. We try to rotate around and hit at different areas. And they do in part look at the different risk levels of different areas, and they'll also have suggestions for us. The audit committee meets, Jane Sullivan's part of the audit committee. They'll meet and go through those recommendations, and then we'll come up with a list of things to look at this year. So they did that. Item 23.09 is the review of the 23-24 last year's technically internal audit. They looked at cash disbursements, they looked at vendor lists, pay rates, timesheets. They have recommendations for a couple of those areas you'll see. They found no deficiencies, nothing that really needed immediate attention or corrective action immediately. I am required by New York State to address even recommendations, and we'll have to call it a corrective action, but if they give us a recommendation to look at something, I need to address that officially and formally, so I will do that, and at the next board meeting, I'll have the response to those recommendations that they gave us. If you have any questions about those findings in that audit, let me know. I can address those issues if you need to, or Jane Sullivan, who's been part of the audit committee and has listened to them as well. Then the next item, 23.10, is a corrective action plan for the external audit, which is the audit of our financial statements that ended on June 30th, 2024. In that, there were two items that they they made recommendations on. One was about a new accounting standard, GASB 101, they call it, for compensated absences. We said we are going to look at that and be prepared for it in the future, so that's all we had to say there. And then the other one was about extra classroom activities, cash receipts and disbursements. They sampled a bunch of different things and found a couple instances where original bank slips were not maybe signed by a student. Small little things like that. There were a couple instances where sales tax was not collected on some things that the club sold. Extra classroom things are a constant battle because those students change every year. Advisors change every year, so we're always trying to educate those students on how to run those clubs, because really they're supposed to be run by the students. I'm talking to our new treasurer, Karen Lewandowski. We're going to put together a more formal training program to be done in October, when the new school year starts up, that will get to the advisors and kind of go through what expectations are for these clubs and try and run those a little better.
Thank you, John. Any questions? Then moving on, recognitions. March is Women's in the Trade Month. Erie 2 BOCES is recognizing the skills and achievements of the young women enrolled in our C&T program. That's Career Technical Programs. So congratulations to Mackenzie, who was enrolled in the automotive program at BOCES and was featured in the recent video. Congratulations. This SAT, Paul, is Paul in the room? Yep, smile back there. So we had SCT and a lot of other areas were involved. We're having trouble with the testing. On the test day, technical glitches cause students to have their tests automatically end before finishing. So thank you to Paul from our tech department for having the support there that prevented that happening and getting all the Chromebooks connections and everything solved. I did talk to some students and they did not have a glitch, so thank you for your extra time and work on that. Thank you. Congratulations, both. That's all I have. because you took the other ones. Thanks.
You're welcome. Works out well that way. Do we regard recognition of guests for agenda items? Do we have any?
No.
Okay. We're going to move on to discussion of agenda items, and there are a few here. I want to call attention. First, I want to call attention to, Patrick has turned in that he's going to retire in the middle school. Thank you for, years of service. And another one that's, really close to home is that someone else at this table has turned in the retirement paperwork. And I definitely want to thank Nora for everything she does for us and for the district. And we appreciate it, Nora. Thank you. And she's going to fly us all out to Cancun in the summer.
For that morning meeting we're having.
And the one thing that is especially extremely important that Nora is still here, that we're going to need a new district clerk.
And I'm going to need someone new too.
And yes, and it's on the agenda, and we want the district to be able to post for this position, obviously as soon as possible. And I know I've had conversations, possibly, splitting the position, the board clerk and the district clerk, and there's a lot that goes into that. And I think that now's the time to have that conversation, and there's no one better than Nora to explain what goes into that role and how it's done. So we are going to have that discussion now. So
you're saying, make it so that our district clerk, who is hired by the board, could possibly be a different person than who takes the position of the assistant to the
those are,
superintendent?
yes, with a board member, I've had that discussion, and so it's, because it was brought up to me, I'm just bringing it up right now, and now's the time to have that, because Doug, the superintendent, needs to be able to post the position, and if there is to be a change, he needs to know.
Yeah, we want to get it posted right away because the last district clerk was during my tenure when she retired. We did have a similar conversation at that time. We ended up keeping, for a multitude of reasons, keeping it together. And part of it was from the district clerk perspective on it last time. But since we have so many new board members, Nora would probably be the best one to speak about it, how the jobs would impact each other from it if they were split. Not only, John, there'd be a large fiscal consideration to it too, that we could talk about after, if you want to keep talking about it. Go ahead, it's all yours. Tell us all you do.
Well, first of all, let me explain my positions. I'm the superintendent's secretary. I'm also the district clerk. The district clerk is appointed by the board, not hired by the board. They're appointed by the board. The district clerk works for the school district. The superintendent's secretary also works for the school district, and I just want to emphasize that the loyalty of this person or persons is always foremost loyal to the school district. Not loyal to anybody or anybody. They are loyal to the school district. That is of utmost and paramount importance for whoever is chosen for the job. That being said, in my opinion, to separate those two positions would be a great disservice not only to the taxpayers, but to the district as a whole. And why I say that is because both jobs are intertwined to a large degree. And let me give you a simple example. Two simple examples. This morning, there was an accident at the corner of Bullis and Girdle Road. Okay? I was here. As the superintendent's secretary, I'm here early. I received notification that there was an accident. Not all administrators were here. So what did I do? I jumped into action. I talked to the SRO, and the first administrator I saw was Mr. Sellen, and I said, can you run down there and make sure that there's no students or faculty or staff impacted by that? I did also call the bus garage. Now, the next thing I did was to email the school board, because they would want to know this information in case anybody contacts them. If I was not the district clerk, I would not have emailed the school board. The school board would really have no knowledge as to what happened during that accident until much later in the day, because I would have had to email or contact or call another person, the district clerk, who probably wouldn't be working. Because let's remember, the district clerk currently receives a stipend. If you separate it, you're going to have an increase in cost to the taxpayers because you would have to hire someone for that. Okay? The second important thing I want to mention is it is the job of the district clerk to compile the agenda for the board meetings. That's probably the biggest thing outside the budget vote. As a superintendent secretary, every resolution that you see on every single agenda says the superintendent recommends the appointment of, and then the resolution. Every single one of those resolutions come across his secretary's desk. Okay, then the secretary will get the background story. They will have questions and go to the administrators or whoever, to help decipher and understand and get the wording correctly. And then the superintendent also goes over the agenda. Now, the district clerk simply types up the agenda. Okay, so if this was a different position or a different person, they would have no background knowledge, no history of these important resolutions. They're just simply typing them up. So that would cause miscommunication. It could have a financial impact if there's mistakes. There are legal ramifications as a district clerk that you would need to be sure you follow. And if you don't have that background information, you could put the district in legal jeopardy. So it's for those reasons and 1,000 other ones that I would not recommend splitting the position.
You did a survey too?
Oh, and I did a survey with other school districts. I'm on a listserv with about 100 other district clerks. And to my knowledge, there is only one school district in Western New York that has separated these two positions, and there have been many challenges the last few years. Thanks.
And looking at the positions, coming from the financial aspect that she made it, if you were to get a part-time person for what we pay for the stipend, you wouldn't get somebody. We have, if you went half-time, I don't know if you get a consistent person because we've tried to have a half-time, a clerical position person in the athletic director's office. I don't know if we're on the second or third one, maybe fourth one by now. So then if you're talking full-time, that's not a full job. I mean, I'm sure we could maybe move some other things around, but now they're doing other jobs too. So where do you want it and how do you want it to function? Really a board decision, but that's the information.
Well, I mean, I think if other districts have moved towards splitting and they're having issues, then I think that's probably not something we should consider at this time. I think that you wear two very large hats, and there's going to be big shoes to fill. And the sooner we start the process, the better. Getting somebody in here to cross-train. And thank you for not leaving before the budget vote. We appreciate it. But you did leave.
And that's one of the important times of training too, where you go there, hey, here's how easy it is, not.
Yeah, so it'd be good to have somebody on board, obviously, during the May budget vote, right? Mm-hmm. If we can find somebody.
We'd like to have the person identified, even if they're not on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, because they can assist. We'll just have to figure that one out. Good news is we've been through it already once, so we kind of have a roadmap, and it worked very well, transitioning, so we can do it again.
Yeah.
Or you can stay and we don't have to.
I'm not staying, sorry. I mean, in all honesty, the decision revolved around the budget vote. Because it's important to have that other person in place to help train and just be there and experience, all that involves. So, and then next year, I'm happy to, be there for them as needed, because it can be very intimidating. It's a big job, but we have a good team.
I want to say thank you, Nora, for all the work that you do. And I know even as you were going through the list, and it's exhaustive, it's only a short list of what you do. I mean, it really is. And as we worked together a little closer over the last year, but also just being a board member for the last 2 years, it is big shoes to fill, but definitely appreciate all the work you do. And I am supporting keeping that together just to retain continuity. Right, that's for me is the key. I mean, we could sit here
I
and
agree.
parse out the financial side of it, but if it's the best interest of the district to allow us to be more effective as board members and with communication, I think it has shown, and I appreciate that, and I think it really makes
Thank you.
sense to keep that together.
Thank you. It's been an honor of a lifetime, by the way, after many years,
I just want
to be at the table with you.
I want to say Nora stepped into other big shoes and has done a fantastic job doing it. And it needs to be pointed out that our district clerks do not have their own organization currently. ECSB tries to support them by hosting 2 workshops a year. They get 2 workshops. If they're lucky enough to be able to walk away from their desk that long and come to a workshop to learn about all of these things. And otherwise, these men and women rely on each other through the listserv that she was talking about. They ask each other questions that way. I cannot imagine walking into that job without anybody to support them. So that is something that ECSB has been working on with them, and hopefully in the next couple of years, we will see a district clerk organization emerge, and it will start here in Western New York. It is a tremendous job, and you have done a beautiful job.
Thank you.
You are going to be missed.
Thank you.
I agree. I would support keeping the position together. I can't even imagine why we would consider separating it. There is one district, and I know firsthand they are having troubles.
So I'm just kind of reading the room, and people said, I think we are in a consensus that we are going to keep it together. And we're obviously in a consensus that, we are very grateful to you, Nora. Thank you. We realize what you do. And we appear to be of consensus that Nora has big shoes and big hats too, was the other consensus point that we have.
Okay, so Dave, you got a job to start working on tomorrow. Buy big shoes and big hats. Thank you, Nora, for so much.
I might need to have some counseling background too. Nora.
Yeah, counseling. That was good.
What else, for discussion, what else is there, does anyone have, if anything?
You stole 2 of my thunders, thanking Patrick and Nora, of course. You see Constantine is on there as our new business teacher. It's sort of new. He's actually been with us since the beginning of the year doing his student teaching through us, and his certification has gone through now, and so now he's officially on the tenure track and officially part of the Iroquois district. So sort of kind of re-welcome him into Iroquois.
I have to abstain from one of the agenda items in the consensus agenda. It is 20.01, it's the substitute list. My brother-in-law is becoming a bus driver, so I will not, or abstain on that item if that's all right.
The whole consensus agenda, we'd have to withdraw the item,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
or you can just.
Or you could just
I'll
abstain
do it.
from the whole consensus.
yeah, if there's enough.
That would be the
Yeah.
easiest.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, and thank you for pointing that out. Sorry we didn't pull that out separate for you.
Oh, yeah, and it's interesting, because in the sub-list, we get the list, but we don't necessarily know what's being added or removed, so it caught my eye.
Yeah.
And then on 2302, which is the new policy for notification of disclosure of employee disciplinary records, is that is that a new law that has to, okay,
Yeah, new law, we don't really have a choice in it whatsoever.
okay. So
I
that,
wish we did.
so right now, if the employee would not be notified? if
Would not be
that-
notified, and also what the state has done is made it more open for the records to the public.
Okay,
As part of making it more open, I think, to try to balance it for employee fears, they said you'll be notified when it happens.
okay. All right, thanks. And also, Nora, thank you to Chuck for the donation of, yeah,
He thanks
the
you.
bench press and weights for Bob to, yeah.
Chuck will help you put it together. By the rule,
Yeah.
all the walls are painted right now.
It was hardly used.
It was hardly.
All the walls got painted, and everything, but what we read.
Okay. We're going to move on to the consent agenda. The basic purpose of the consent agenda is to act upon routine matters in an expeditious manner. Items placed on the consent agenda are determined by the board president and vice president in cooperation with the superintendent, and are those which are considered common to the operation of the district and don't require no special board discussion or debate. Board members have the ability and responsibility of reviewing the consent agenda ahead of time. A board member may request that any item on the consent agenda be removed and inserted in an appropriate place on the regular agenda. The president will the motion, followed by a request for a second motion. Okay, is there a request to withdraw any items from the agenda?
I'm just gonna abstain.
Yeah. Okay. Is there a request to add any items to the agenda? Okay. Can I have the second to approve the consent agenda? Okay. First by the president, second by Jane. All in favor? So we have 5 in favor, 1 abstaining, and no no's, so the agenda passes. Okay. Do we have any guests for non-agenda topics? Okay. Do we have a need for a executive session?
I do not.
Can I have a motion to adjourn? Can it was first by Jane and Todd seconded. Jane. Todd seconded. Okay, can I have a vote to adjourn? Okay, all in favor of adjourning? No nays? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.